All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recreate one of the shots that was used as a chapter intro in volume 2 of the digital photography book, and it is a window light portrait. Now, window light portraits are great because, well, you already have the light. We're going to use a north-facing window here, and you're going to get the best light traditionally from a north-facing window. So if you have a north-facing window in your house, you're already set because you're already going to have beautiful light coming in. Now, we're going to have a couple of things to deal with. The main thing we're going to have to deal with is the harshness of the light. Depending on what type of the day you do this, it could be a lot of direct streaming light coming straight in. So what we're going to use is we're going to use this. This is a diffuser. This thing makes a huge difference. Now, the one I'm using here actually happens to be called a Last Light. It's like a tri-grip diffuser, and what it does is it just softens daylight. So you can take this right out in the middle of a street and do a street shot using nothing but this, and it will just soften and diffuse the light. This is what's called a one-stop diffuser. So if you're looking to buy one of these, and by the way, it doesn't have to have this handle, I just like this, the one made by Last Light, which is this one. I like it because you can hold the camera in one hand and then use the diffuser in the other to you know, kind of cover two birds with one stone. But they make them without this. You can get them from any kind of, Westcott makes them, a lot of different companies make them. But anyway, what it's going to do is you're going to put it between your subject and the light coming in, and it's going to soften and spread the light and make it even softer, because that's what's going to be your big challenge, is making the light coming from the window soft. Now, depending on how dirty your windows are, if your windows are dirty, believe it or not, that helps soften the light. So there are other things that you can do. We'll talk about those in a moment. But this is going to be our main tool for this entire shoot, is just having you or somebody else. In my case, we're going to have my assistant Brad here on the set in just a moment, and he's going to actually hold this up to diffuse the light used on our model. Now, we're very fortunate for this shoot today is that I was able to actually get the same male and female models that I used in volume 2, which was all based on studio lighting, to be here for this series today. So we're going to bring in our model here in just a moment. But first I want to talk about where do you position the model when they come in. Well, first we have this chair. So what you want to do is you want to position your model kind of ideally maybe 6 feet from the window. You don't want them too close to the window because the light at the closest of the window is going to be the harshest. So you want to move them away. So putting them about 6 feet away is kind of an ideal position. Also, if you don't have a diffuser or you're worried about even softer light, if you really, really want softer light, let's say that you're doing a portrait of a mother and child and you want really just beautiful, soft wrapping light, in that case, the ideal situation is to be able to move just behind the end of the window. Now, we have a wall here, so we're kind of constricted in what we can do, but ideally what you would do is you would place the model maybe just behind the window, just kind of a little bit back in this corner, so that the softer you are from the center of the light coming in, the softer the light's going to be. So just getting a little bit further behind it's going to be great. In this case, we're going to recreate that first shot, so we're going to bring in our model. This is Shay, and she's going to be helping us on the set today. Now, my camera position is going to be over there. Hi, Shay.
Hi.
All right, so she's actually going to be facing the camera over that way, and we're going to set up there in just a moment. And then I'm going to bring Brad Moore, who's my assistant, in. Brad is going to actually diffuse the light by putting this diffuser between the daylight and the window. So here comes Brad now. This is Brad Moore. Hey, Brad. And we're just going to have him and show him where. Well, I'm going to get off the set so we have more room here. What we're going to do is we'll go ahead and set up. I'll let Brad get in position. But what we're going to do is put something between the natural light and the model just to soften it. And I'm going to head right back over there. All right, a couple of tips on how to shoot this. I'm shooting this on a tripod because we're working in natural light, and we don't have a tremendous amount of natural light, so I'm working on a tripod, but you don't necessarily have to. One thing that you would want to do, because she's seated, if you shoot it from a standing angle, so you're shooting it up high, you're going to have a very average perspective, because that's how anybody walking into this room would look and see the shot. You're shooting from up this high. So ideally, you would drop the tripod down, shoot from one knee, you're going to get a much better straight-on perspective. That's number one. Number two is, ideally, I want to separate her from the background. There's a lot of things happening behind her. I want her to stand out. So one of the tricks to do that is to shoot wide open. Use the lowest number f-stop you can on your lens. In this case, we're using a 70 to 200. I prefer to shoot further away from the subject, and I like to shoot with long lenses like this because it gives a real nice compression. If you read volume 2, we talked about that, and in volume 3, I have a whole chapter on lenses, and we talk about all that junk, so I'm not going to go into it here, but I do prefer to shoot at the long end of the range. So a lot of times I'll be shooting in more like the 200 millimeter range for portraits than I would something shorter or wider. But again, I'm shooting at f f2.8. What that's going to do, it's going to put her in focus and the background quite a bit out of focus. Now, the other thing that you have to do is you kind of have to make sure that you zoom in enough to where the subject kind of fills the frame. One of the mistakes that I talked about in Volume 1 that a lot of amateurs make is they leave way too much headroom above the subject. So if this was the subject's head, they leave a big gap up here like this. You want your subject to pretty much fill the frame. And by the way, it's perfectly okay to actually cut off a little of the subject's head. If you look in commercial photography, ads in magazines, the next time you pick up a magazine, look, and you'll see that again and again and again with the subject's head cut off. You will rarely see their chin cut off, but you'll see their head cut off. They're just the top of it, just the hair. Quite often, it's very, very popular because they're trying to fill the frame and get a lot of impact. So here's what we're going to do. We've got the subject in place. We've got Brad there with the diffuser. We're going to have Brad put the diffuser in place. I'm going to get down on one knee. We're just going to take a few test shots and see how it looks. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. And yeah, just a little bit of a smile just like that. All right. So I'm taking a look at the first one. Yeah, I can tell you what. The light looks nice and wrapping coming off the image. The white balance probably needs a little bit of tweaking, but other than that, there's not a whole lot to do, and this is why people love shooting natural light so much, because really it's pretty easy. The whole trick to this thing is Brad holding that diffuser, because that's what's going to make the light wrapping. Also, you want to be able to get the diffuser kind of close to your subject too. Of course, unless you need to use more light, then you can get back a little bit with it. But if you don't have a Brad, by the way, I highly recommend a Brad. But if you don't have a Brad, you can also use a light stand to do the same thing. They make light stands with a little boom arm and 2 clips, so you can just position the diffuser exactly where you want it. Once you have one of those boom arms, it really makes it easy, because if you're shooting by yourself, then you can do this exact same thing. So that's pretty much it. I know you think, well, there's got to be more to it. There's really not. The only one thing that you have to keep an eye out for inside the camera is to make sure that you don't clip the highlights, that it doesn't get so bright that her face starts to get little highlights and things that you don't want. The way to do that is turn the highlight warning on in your camera. All right? Go into your camera's menu and turn the highlight warning on. What that means is when I take the shot, if any part of the photo is getting so bright that it will actually turn white and there's no detail, that's the one thing you want to fix in the camera. You don't want to try to fix that later in something like Photoshop. You may not be able to, because if the detail's gone forever, it may just be gone forever. So here's what I do. Turn your highlight warning on. Take a test shot and then look on the back of the camera. If any part of the photo is actually blinking at you, that's telling you that that part of the photo will have no detail whatsoever. So what you're going to use is a thing called exposure compensation. You're going to take the shot. You're going to see that it's blinking. You're going to lower your exposure by 1/3 of a stop. So what you're doing there is the camera says, I think this is the proper exposure, but it's wrong. In this case, we have so many white things here in the room. There's so much white light and white everything that it could actually destroy part of the photograph. So the exposure the camera thinks is right, you're saying, I'm seeing it, but it's not right, it's wrong. So you're going to go drop the exposure 1/3 of a stop using exposure compensation. There's a little button on the camera. You just hold, you dial it down 1/3. Take the shot again and look, do you still see the blinkies? If it's still blinking, drop it again. Now, if you wind up dropping at a stop and a half, and all of a sudden your subject looks, dark, then you're either going to have to bring in a light, or you're going to have a little bit of clipping. Here's the secret to clipping. Does it matter? Is the thing, like if it's her face that's clipping, if it's her eyes, the whites of her eyes or something like that, that absolutely matters. That's the worst thing that could happen. But if it's some little aspect in the background, if it's a little piece of metal on the window back there, do I care if that doesn't have perfect detail? Absolutely not. I could just let it go. So that's the recipe, is make sure that you don't have any clipping. Open it wide open on the camera, f2.8, or if your camera goes to f4, whatever the lowest number your lens will go to. Put it on a tripod and shoot low at the same angle as your subject. And that's how you do a very, very simple and easy window light portrait.